Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. The blood moon rose swollen and red, and Elira Noctine stood in the clearing with her wrists bound in rough iron, every breath scraping her throat. Villagers formed a ring around her, faces pale in the crimson light, whispers crawling like insects. She had been accused of calling the monster, of luring death to grim Willow Reach, and the words stung worse than the rope. Her boots were soaked with dew and fear. When the howl shattered the forest, it felt close enough to split her ribs. The beast burst from Bloodvale Forest, towering, fur blackened as if burned by night itself. Gasps rippled. Elira's knees trembled. The creature's eyes found hers, glowing. Silver, and something inside her answered, sharp and aching. The elder shouted for torches. Chains rattled. The monster lunged, not at the crowd, but toward her. Iron snapped. Someone screamed her name. As claws halted inches from her skin, a heat bloomed in her chest, terrifying and intimate. The beast bowed its massive head, breath steaming her face, and the moon flared brighter, binding them in silence while the world held its breath. Days earlier, before accusation and moonfire, Elira had learned to live unseen. Grim Willow Reach prized obedience, not questions, and she had both. She mended nets, gathered herbs, listened more than she spoke. Nisara Valine teased her for softness, for believing in mercy where none had grown. Yet the forest listened when Elira sang, low and wordless, a tune her mother once hummed while braiding her hair. Mother was gone now, taken by winter sickness and the village's indifference. Elder Malus warned that the Bloodvale Forest remembered grief and answered it. Elira had laughed then, gentle and wrong. When livestock vanished and claw marks scarred doors, fear bloomed. Iroquois Valesh, all sharp smiles and ambition, pointed at her quiet walks, her songs at dusk. He called her cursed. The pack enforcer Corvin Blackmere watched without blinking. Rumors hardened into stones. The night the moon turned red, they bound her wrists and marched her out, promising justice. Elira tasted iron and ash, wishing someone would see her, wishing she could be brave enough to run. The monster had a name whispered only in warnings. Zaven Morkant, the broken alpha, the exile who ruled the black spine shadows. Elira had never believed monsters chose loneliness. Yet as the beast bowed, she felt not hunger but restraint, a careful holding back. The bond struck like lightning through marrow. Images flooded her mind, snow-cracked stone, a cliff edge screaming with wind, a heart scarred by betrayal. Zaven's pain throbbed alongside hers, mirrored and fierce. Iroquois drew a blade, shouting that the beast had tricked her. Torches surged forward. Zaven roared, the sound shuddering through bark and bone, and shifted. Fur flowed into skin, claws into hands. He stood naked but unashamed, tall, marked with old scars that mapped survival. Gasps turned to screams. He stepped between Elira and the blades, eyes never leaving hers. "Mate," he said, voice rough as gravel and promise. The word crashed through the clearing. Elder Malus fell to her knees. Elira's heart hammered. Mate meant protection. Mate meant war. The pack did not bow. They circled tighter, fear sharpening cruelty. Iroquois lunged, blade flashing. Zaven moved like storm water, deflecting steel, breaking bone with measured force. He would not kill. Elira felt that vow like a tether. She shouted for them to stop, but her voice drowned beneath chaos. Nisara cried her name. Corvin hesitated, then lowered his weapon, eyes haunted. Flames leapt, sparks biting Elira's cheeks. Zaven shielded her, heat and blood mingling. "Run," he told her, urgent and gentle. The bond pulsed, showing her a path through Moonreach Forest, roots glowing faintly as if remembering her song. She ran, chains forgotten, moonlight guiding her feet. Behind her, the clearing erupted. Ahead, the forest opened, breathing her in. She stumbled at a stream, and Zaven caught her, hand steady. He knelt, breaking her bonds, touching her wrists with reverence. "I never wanted this for you," he said, "but the moon chose." Alira swallowed terror and wonder, knowing choice had already changed her. At dawn, they reached Lunaris Refuge, stone hidden by ivy and hush. Lysa Briar tended burns without questions. Elder Orin Halewatch waited, grave and curious. Alira slept and dreamed of cliffs and songs, of a future braided with teeth and tenderness. When she woke, Zaven sat watch, eyes red-rimmed, vigilant. He told her of exile, of refusing a blood right that killed children to crowned kings. Iroquois' father had led it. The truth landed heavy. Outside, the forest stirred. Grim Willow Reach would hunt. The bond warmed, not trapping, but steadying, asking courage. Alira stood, pain blooming, then settling. She met Zyven's gaze and saw not a monster, but a vow. "We don't hide," she said, voice stronger than she felt. "We face them." Zaven inclined his head, pride and fear tangled. The blood moon had bound them. Morning would test them. And whatever came, Alira knew the girl who walked unseen was gone, replaced by someone the forest would remember. Morning light thinned the red from the sky, leaving Lunaris Refuge wrapped in gray calm. Alira stood at the threshold, boots damp, listening to birds test their voices after terror. Zaven watched the tree line, shoulders tense, every sense strung tight. The bond hummed softly, no longer lightning, but a steady chord. Elder Orin spoke of Grim Willow Reach gathering hunters, of Iroquois fanning fear into orders. Alira pictured Nysara's face and felt guilt bite. She asked to return, to speak, to end this before blood answered blood. Zaven refused at first, voice low, remembering exile and broken promises. Then Lysa pressed a bundle of salves into Alira's hands and said courage was contagious. They would go together, quietly. If the pack chose war, the truth would still be planted. Alira breathed the forest's resin and ash and steadied herself. She had been invisible once. Today she would be seen, even if seeing hurt. The path ahead curved like a question, and she accepted the answer forming within her, slow and resolute, trusting the bond not as a chain but as a promise to choose mercy without surrendering strength, while footsteps gathered beyond leaves, counting breaths, measuring resolve in patient silence. They reached the outskirts by noon, smoke threading the air. Grim Willow Reach had changed, doors barred, windows watched. Iroquois stood by the well, blade visible, speaking justice with a smile that never warmed his eyes. Alira stepped forward, murmurs surged. She told them of the bond, of the truth Zaven carried about the right. Elder Malus appeared trembling, confirming fragments, urging restraint. Iroquois laughed, naming lies, accusing seduction. He ordered Corvin to seize Zaven. Corvin hesitated, then obeyed, iron clashing. Zaven yielded, palms open, refusing violence. Alira felt panic rise but held fast. She demanded a trial under the old laws, the ones written before fear ruled. The words surprised even her. Silence spread. The elders conferred. A challenge was set for nightfall at the Black Spine Cliffs. Proof would decide guilt. As they withdrew, Nysara slipped Alira a clasped hand and a warning glance. The village breathed again, but it was the breath before a storm. Zaven met Alira's gaze, calm despite chains, and the bond steadied her racing thoughts, reminding her that truth, once spoken aloud, could not be fully buried. Again, even when crowds demanded certainty instead of courage, and leaders fed fear like fuel to flames. Night sharpened the cliffs into knives, wind tore at cloaks, carrying salt and old screams. The trial began without ceremony. Iroquois presented witnesses coached to remember hunger and blame monsters. Alira countered with Eldrick Moonmere's records, produced by Orin, describing the blood right and its cost. Gasps rippled. Iroquois snarled and challenged Zaven to prove restraint under the moon. The blood moon rose again, terrible and bright. Zaven shifted halfway, bones creaking, holding the line with a roar swallowed by the wind. Alira stepped into danger, placing her hand over his heart, grounding him through the bond. The moon pulled. He resisted. The crowd watched, breathless. Iroquois struck then, aiming for Alira's back. Corvin intercepted, blade turning aside at the last instant. Chaos erupted. Zaven completed the shift, not in rage but resolve, pinning Iroquois without, killing him. The moon burned, witness to mercy, and the cliff seemed to lean closer to listen. Elder Malus named the verdict aloud, voice breaking, declaring the right forbidden, and Iroquois guilty of deception, while the pack felt something ancient loosen its grip along spines stiff with fear, hope stirring reluctantly as stars blinked approval overhead and the wind quieted, waiting for change ahead. After, dawn found them raw and shaking. Iroquois was bound for exile. Corvin knelt, asking forgiveness. Zaven accepted with a nod, setting terms that spared lives and ended rights. The pack murmured assent. Alira felt the weight of choice settle. Some would never forgive her. That was truth. Nisara hugged her fiercely, tears hot. Elder Oren spoke of rebuilding, of guarding children first. The bond warmed, no longer demanding, but offering. Zaven asked Alira what she wanted. The question frightened her more than claws. She wanted to belong without shrinking. She wanted a home that did not eat its young. She chose to stay, to learn the laws, to sing the forest awake in safer ways. Zaven vowed to lead with restraint, to listen when the moon howled loudest. Together they faced the village, not as myth, but as people. The work ahead was heavy, yet the air tasted cleaner, and the path, though steep, was visible. Trust would take seasons, scars would linger, but the first stone had been moved, and movement mattered more than comfort ever had under a sky, learning new colors for mornings, unafraid of their own light, and nights guarded by choice, not fear anymore. When the sun fully rose, Alira walked with Zaven to the stream where chains had fallen. She washed her hands, watching rust bleed away. Zaven confessed fear of failing her, of the moon's pull. She confessed fear of being small again. They promised honesty as armor. The forest stirred, accepting them with birdsong. Children peered from doorways as they passed. Some smiled. Alira began teaching songs that soothed tempers, and Zaven trained guardians who valued restraint. Seasons turned. The blood moon returned, red but quieter. Under it they stood together, not bound by terror, but by choice. Grim Willow Reach endured, changed. Alira felt the bond settle into something like home. She had faced the monster and found a mate. She had faced herself and found courage. The moon climbed higher, and the forest, listening, remembered. Years would test them, storms would come, yet the promise held, braided from truth and mercy, strong enough to weather teeth, time and doubt together. Under every moon, red or pale, they chose again. That choosing became the story the forest kept, and the one the village learned to tell without whispering fear between breaths at night or daylight. Anymore, ever again, for good, finally. The weeks after the trial did not soften Grim Willow Reach as quickly as hope had promised. Suspicion lingered like smoke trapped under eaves. Alira felt it in the way conversations. Paused when she entered. In the careful distance some villagers kept from Zaven's shadow. He noticed too, though he pretended not to. Throwing himself into patrols and training to prove restraint was not weakness. The bond between them had quieted into a constant warmth, but tension pressed from outside, testing it. Elder Oren warned that old loyalties die slowly. Children were safer now, rights ended, yet fear searched for new shapes. Alira focused on rebuilding trust, tending gardens with Lysa, singing at dusk where anyone could listen. Some nights only the wind answered. Other nights a single voice joined hers, then another. Progress came in inches, not leaps. Still, Rumors crept in from beyond the forest, packs watching, measuring Zaven's mercy as an opening. Power shifted, and predators noticed. Alira sensed eyes beyond trees, patience sharpened by hunger. When a boundary stone was shattered at dawn, clawed deep with unfamiliar marks, Zaven's jaw tightened. The peace they'd claimed was fragile. Protecting it would demand more than words. It would demand choosing when to stand still and when to bare teeth, without losing the soul they were fighting to keep intact together. That night, scouts reported movement along Ashcliff Expanse. Names surfaced in whispers. Varric Drown, a rogue who thrived on chaos, trading blood for advantage. He had once courted Iroquois' ambition, then vanished when exile fell. Now he returned with followers, promising strength through fear. Zaven called council. Voices rose. Some urged preemptive attack, eager to reclaim dominance. Others clung to the new laws, afraid of slipping back into darkness. Alira listened, heart pounding, and spoke when silence opened. She proposed diplomacy first, a meeting under neutral ground. Shock rippled. Zaven studied her, pride and worry interlaced. He agreed, setting strict terms. The council consented reluctantly. Preparations began at once. As dusk deepened, Nisara pulled Alira aside, warning that mercy can be mistaken for weakness. Alira knew. She felt the risk keenly, but also the cost of abandoning who they were becoming. That night, the bond pulsed with shared resolve and fear. Zaven confessed nightmares of losing control if provoked. Alira confessed dreams of being blamed again if blood spilled. They held each other until sleep claimed them, aware that dawn would test whether change could survive, contact with those who profited from old ways. The meeting took place on a bare ridge where stone met sky. Wind scoured the ground clean, leaving nowhere to hide. Varric arrived smiling, flanked by lean wolves with hungry eyes. His gaze slid over Alira, assessing, dismissive. He praised Zaven's restraint with mocking courtesy, then demanded tribute for peace. Zaven refused calmly. Varric laughed, circling. Speaking of Pack's already bending knee, he offered alliance sealed by a hunt. Prove dominance, spill blood together. Alira felt the bond tighten as if the moon climbed pale. She stepped forward, naming the cost of such power, reminding Varric of children lost to rights. He sneered, calling her a soft heart behind a strong back. The insult cut deep, but she held steady. She countered with a different offer. Shared borders, shared watch, no tribute. Varric's smile thinned. He lunged suddenly, testing. Zaven blocked without striking, absorbing the blow. Gasps followed. Varric withdrew, eyes alight. "You'll break," he said to Zaven, to Alira, to the idea of mercy itself. He vanished into the rocks, laughter trailing like carrion scent. The ridge exhaled. They had avoided blood, but the threat sharpened. Alira's knees shook once they were alone. Zaven steadied her. The bond hummed with warning. War had not been chosen, but it had been invited. In the days that followed, pressure mounted. Traps sprung along borders, livestock stolen, a child chased but saved by Corvin's quick shift. Fear surged anew. Some villagers blamed Alira for proposing the meeting. Others thanked her for buying time. Zaven trained harder, teaching restraint under provocation, building layered defenses. Alira organized watches and signals, using songs to coordinate without panic. The forest responded, paths clearer, animals alert. One night, Varric's wolves tested the perimeter. A skirmish broke out. Zaven ordered retreat after driving them off, refusing pursuit. The choice cost them. Torrin Ashfell was injured protecting a child. Anger flared. Voices accused Zaven of softness. Alira felt doubt gnaw, wondering if mercy invited harm. She spoke with Torrin, who surprised her by defending Zaven. "I'd bleed again," he said, "for this chance." The words steadied her. That evening, Zaven admitted fear of losing his pack's trust. Alira reminded him leadership was not applause. It was endurance. They stood beneath a clouded moon, hands linked, choosing patience even as urgency screamed. The bond cooled their racing. Hearts, not numbing but focusing, reminding them why they began. Somewhere beyond the trees, Vorik watched, waiting for a mistake. The question was not whether it would come, but whether they would survive it without becoming what hunted them. The mistake came with a scream before dawn. Nisara was taken while checking traps. Panic fractured the village. Tracks led toward black spine cliffs. Varric's mark scorched into stone. Zaven prepared a rescue, small and fast. Some demanded a full assault. Alira insisted on precision. She knew Nisara's stubborn courage. Delay would cost more. As they set out, Alira felt fear sharpen into clarity. This was no longer theory or council debate. It was personal. Zaven swore to bring Nisara home. The bond blazed, fierce and focused. They moved through shadowed ravines, wind slicing tears from eyes. Ahead, torchlight flickered. The rescue would demand speed and restraint under cruelty's bait. Alira breathed, steadying herself, recalling chains breaking, hands choosing mercy. She would not be small. She would be brave enough to act. The cliffs loomed, echoing with distant laughter. Chapter by chapter, the cost of change rose. Now it demanded proof paid in risk. As they crested the ridge, Alira tightened her grip on Zaven's hand, ready to face whatever waited, knowing the next choice would cut deeper than any before, and that surviving it would redefine not just their bond, but the future they dared to protect together. Night clung to the black spine cliffs like wet cloth, swallowing sound as Alira crept forward with Zaven and 3 guards. Torches burned below, their smoke bitter, outlining cages bolted to stone. Nisara's voice carried once, cut short, and Alira's chest seized. Zaven signaled stillness. The bond pulsed, mapping paths, warning of eyes. They descended a switchback. Boots, scraping shale, timing breaths between gusts. At the base, Varric's camp sprawled crude and cruel, trophies hanging like promises kept by violence. Alira spotted Nisara bound near a fire, face bruised but chin lifted. Rage surged, then cooled. Zaven split the team with silent gestures. Alira slid behind a stack of crates, heart hammering. She waited, counting heartbeats, remembering songs meant to calm storms. When a guard turned, she sang under her breath, a thread of sound that bent attention without breaking it. The man blinked, swayed, stepped away. Zaven moved. Steel kissed leather. Bodies fell quietly. Varric laughed somewhere higher, savoring the hunt he thought inevitable. Unaware Mercy had learned how to move like shadow. Above, clouds bruised the moon, and the cliffs echoed patience, as if stone itself conspired to hide them a little longer before dawn betrayed secrets all. Zaven reached Nisara first, cutting bonds with careful speed, murmuring reassurance that steadied her shaking hands. Alira covered them, eyes scanning firelight and dark. Then Varric dropped from above, landing. Between flames, grinned sharp. He clapped slowly, praising the rescue, promising sport. Wolves surged. The night exploded. Zaven shifted in a blur, intercepting strikes, moving bodies away from the fire. Alira dragged Nisara toward the rocks, singing again, louder now, the melody guiding allies through smoke. Corvin barreled in, breaking a cage to free captives, while Torin held a line with bloodied resolve. Varric circled Zaven, taunting Mercy, slashing shallow cuts to provoke rage. The bond screamed restraint. Zaven listened. When Varric overextended, Zaven disarmed him and pinned him hard, claws at throat, refusing the kill. Alira shouted for retreat. The rescued ran. Varric spat curses, promising return, as Zaven knocked him aside and sealed the path with a rockfall. The cliffs thundered. Silence followed, ragged and alive. Breath came harshly, stars trembling overhead, and Alira felt the bond steady, anchoring fear into purpose as they fled upward, carrying the wounded. Counting names, refusing to leave anyone behind until the wind hid footsteps completely, and dawn waited silently nearby cliffs. They escaped before sunrise, collapsing at Lunaris Refuge with injuries bound and spirits frayed. Lysa worked without pause. Nisara slept, fever easing by morning. Relief washed through Alira, then receded as consequences gathered. Scouts reported Vorik retreating but rallying others, spinning the night as insult. The pack argued. Some demanded execution when Varric returned. Others feared escalation. Zaven called for patience again, setting sentries and strengthening borders. Alira felt the weight of leadership settle heavier. She questioned her choice to negotiate earlier, guilt prickling. Zaven found her at the stream, blood crusted on his knuckles. He admitted doubt, too, confessed the restraint cost him sleep. Together they chose transparency, speaking to the village openly, honoring Torn's wound, naming fear without feeding it. Children listened, wide-eyed. Elders nodded slowly. Alira sang at dusk, not to soothe this time, but to rally, weaving courage into simple words. The song caught, spreading. That night, the blood moon rose dimmer, as if listening. Owls called approval, fires burned low, and even the trees seemed to lean inward, guarding a fragile calm earned by effort, honesty, and shared resolve that promised survival through unity, not dominance alone. Under uncertain skies ahead, stillness held briefly there. Peace did not last. 2 days later, a messenger arrived wounded, bearing Varric's challenge carved into bone. He demanded Zaven's surrender at Ashcliff Expanse by the next full dark, or children would be taken. The threat cracked the village. Panic surged. Alira felt ice in her veins. Zaven refused to bargain lives, but also refused slaughter. He proposed a single combat under witnesses, binding outcome by ancient law. The elders balked, yet saw no cleaner path. Preparations were grim. Alira argued to fight beside him. He refused, voice breaking. The bond flared, pain shared. At dusk, she braided a cord for his wrist, singing steadiness into it. He pressed his forehead to hers, promising return. At Ashcliff, packs gathered. Varric arrived adorned with stolen symbols, confident. The moon rose pale. Combat was swift and brutal. Zaven absorbed blows, waited, then ended it cleanly, pinning Varric again. This time, witnesses saw restraint win. Varric was exiled beyond borders, stripped of followers. The law held. A howl marked judgment, echoed by silence, sealing a future purchased without bloodshed, despite the cost, carved across every face present. As night released breath slowly, and courage stood visible at last, there among them, all together. After, Grim Willow Reach began to heal in earnest. Borders held, children slept. Alira felt the bond soften into trust, earned. Zaven led without fear, listening first. Corvin trained guardians who valued restraint. Nissera recovered, fierce as ever, laughing through scars. The forest brightened. When the blood moon returned, it rose red but gentle, no longer a summons to terror. Alira stood beneath it with Zaven, choosing each other openly. She remembered chains and whispers and felt gratitude sharpened by memory. Change had caused pain, but it had stuck. Songs filled evenings. The village told a new story. Under the blood moon, the monster had become a mate, and the mate had become a promise. They would keep it. Years would test them, yet seasons turned kinder. Laws held firm, and love learned to be practical, brave, and forgiving, guiding hands, calming tempers, and guarding children beneath changing skies. Together they faced storms, choosing mercy daily, until hope felt ordinary, strong enough to endure. The forest remembered, and the moon approved, silently. Life continued, hard and bright, earned by courage and care. Grim Willow Reach breathed easier, awake to gentler futures at last for everyone there. Together, now, always in shared peace. Autumn arrived with quiet tests rather than open threats. Leaves browned, winds sharpened, and Grim Willow Reach learned how peace demanded vigilance. Alira spent her days organizing watch rotations and food stores, discovering that leadership lived in small, relentless details. Some villagers still avoided her eyes, but fewer crossed the road to escape her presence. Zaven trained guardians at dawn, emphasizing restraint until muscles burned and tempers cooled. The bond between them settled into rhythm, pulsing strongest when decisions weighed heavy. One evening, Eldrick Mumir uncovered sealed records beneath the council hall. pages brittle with age. They spoke of a forgotten lineage tied to song and moonlight, of bonds meant to temper Wolf's fury rather than amplify it. Alira read until her eyes stung, realizing her mother's lullabies mirrored the script's patterns. Heritage unfolded not as glory, but responsibility. If the songs were lost again, cycles of blood would return. Sharing the truth frightened her. Power misunderstood invited envy, yet secrecy had nearly destroyed them before. She chose disclosure. At dusk, Alira sang the ancient refrain, explaining its purpose. The crowd listened, hushed. Some scoffed, others wept. The wind carried the melody outward as if the forest itself leaned closer, remembering something it had been waiting for all along, patiently, through long nights and careless generations of forgetting. That night, a messenger arrived breathless, warning of sickness in a neighboring settlement. Children burned with fever, wolves grew erratic. Panic stirred. The council debated borders and risk. Alira insisted aid was necessary, song included. Zaven agreed, though fear shadowed his eyes. They traveled light, crossing ridges into hollowed valleys where rot clung to air. Lysa worked tirelessly, mixing salves. Alira sang softly, the melody easing convulsions, calming wolves back into skin. The effect stunned onlookers. Relief spread, but so did whispers of leverage. A rival elder suggested binding Alira to contracts, ensuring exclusive access to her gift. Zaven bristled. Alira felt the old pressure to shrink, to appease. She refused gently, stating the song was not a commodity. The refusal sparked anger. Stones were thrown. They withdrew under guard. On the journey home, silence pressed. Zaven apologized for the danger. Alira countered that courage was not safety. At the border, a flare rose. Grimwillow Reach under alarm. They ran, hearts racing, arriving to find a fire set near the granaries. No casualties, but intent clear. Someone inside the village had betrayed them, trading fear for power once more, proving peace had not erased ambition, only driven it underground, waiting for opportunity to strike again. Suspicion fractured trust. Watches doubled, whispers sharpened. Alira felt eyes tracking her steps, weighing her worth. Zaven confronted the council, demanding transparency. Elders resisted, fearing panic. Alira argued that secrecy bred monsters. They compromised, calling an assembly. Evidence emerged slowly. Footprints near stores, a coded mark burned into wood. It matched Varric's network. Someone had opened the gates, Torn Ashfell confessed, face ashen. He had been approached, promised protection for his family if he lit the fire as distraction. He had not expected harm. The village erupted. Punishment demanded blood. Alira stepped between Torn and knives, heart hammering. She proposed exile instead, paired with restitution and watch service beyond borders. Rage met her words. Zaven stood beside her, silent support anchoring resolve. Elder Orrin invoked new law. The sentence held. Torrin wept gratitude and shame. Trust wavered but did not shatter. That night, Alira cried alone, grief tangled with resolve. Zaven found her and listened. He did not fix. He stayed. The bond warmed, steady, leadership hurt, mercy bruised. Yet the alternative was familiar and deadly. They chose pain that healed over pain that spread, again, even as doubt lingered like frost waiting for careless steps. Winter threatened early. Snow-dusted ridges. Supplies tightened. Alira organized trade routes, negotiating fair exchange without tribute. Success bred resentment among those who preferred old dominance. One evening, Nisara revealed she had been followed. The mark matched the burned symbol. Fear flared. Zaven ordered a covert sweep. They caught a courier at dawn, messages detailing a plot to seize Alira during the next blood moon. Believing her song could crown a tyrant, the realization chilled her. She was no longer just a leader's mate. She was leverage. Zaven wanted to hide her at Lunaris Refuge. Alira refused, unwilling to teach fear. They argued, voices low but fierce. the bond straining. Finally, they compromised. Decoys, watchers, and truth, spoken aloud to strip power from secrecy. At assembly, Illyra explained the threat plainly, refusing dramatics. Volunteers stepped forward to guard. Trust knit tighter. The blood moon rose amid preparation, red and watchful. Attempts came and failed. Figures turned back by alert sentries and song-laced signals. At dawn, the village stood unbroken. Exhaustion followed, but also pride. Illyra realized empowerment multiplied when shared. She was not alone carrying the weight. Zaven admitted fear had driven his urge to hide her. She kissed his knuckles, thanking him for honesty. The bond eased, resilient, strengthened by conflict, weathered together. Spring teased the horizon. Snow melted into singing streams. Grimwillow Reach breathed easier, scars knitting into stories. Illyra taught children the songs, framing them as care, not control. Zaven formalized laws protecting choice, ending rights forever. Pacts beyond took notice, some seeking alliance on new terms. One evening, under a gentler moon, Zaven asked Illyra to bind lives formally. Not as decree, but promise. She said yes without hesitation, joy bright and quiet. The ceremony was simple. Song, shared vows, the forest listening. Elders blessed, children laughed. Nisara cried openly, the bond shimmered, complete without trapping. Yet Illyra knew chapters remained unwritten. Power would always tempt, fear would resurface, but now there were tools. Truth, community, restraint. Under stars, she rested her head on Zaven's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of a heart that had learned mercy without losing strength. The monster myth faded, replaced by a man choosing daily. And she, once unseen, stood rooted, singing futures into being with others beside her. The forest approved in quiet ways. The moon climbed pale. Life continued, earned and shared, resilient enough to endure whatever next chapter demanded from them all together. Summer brought heat and attention. Caravans arrived more often, carrying traders, envoys, and curiosity seekers drawn by stories of a village that ended. Blood rites without falling to chaos. Illyra learned how scrutiny felt heavier than fear. Every word she spoke was weighed, every song tested for weakness. Zaven shielded where he could, redirecting questions to councils and process, insisting leadership was shared. Still, power gathered gravity. One afternoon, a delegation from the high valleys arrived bearing gifts and veiled demands. They praised restraint, then hinted at exclusive accords if Illyra would teach their elders the song. She refused politely. Smiles tightened. That night, rumors spread that Grimwillow Reach hoarded peace. Illyra countered by inviting open lessons at the commons, teaching anyone who came the basics of calming rhythm without binding force. The act disarmed some critics, angered others who wanted leverage. Zaven worried the openness exposed them. Illyra argued secrecy had already proven fatal. Their debates stayed quiet but cut deep, the bond prickling. When scouts reported unknown watchers near the stream, tension snapped into urgency. Zaven doubled patrols. Illyra adjusted signals. The village felt watched, breaths shallow, waiting for a blow that did not come, knowing patience could be the sharpest weapon against those who counted on mistakes born of exhaustion and pride alike. The blow came disguised as help. A healer named Selka arrived alone, claiming her settlement burned, offering information on a growing coalition hostile to restraint. She shared names and routes convincingly. Lisa welcomed her. Illyra sensed unease but found no proof. Selka volunteered tirelessly, earning trust. Days later, a child collapsed after drinking from the stream. Panic flared. Lisa traced the illness to tainted water upstream. Tracks matched Selka's boots. Confronted, Selka fled toward the forest. Zaven pursued, catching her near a ravine. She confessed under pressure, hired to poison, and then saved the village, proving the coalition's necessity. Zaven bound her, fury simmering. Illyra arrived breathless, anger and relief tangling. She demanded a public hearing. The council agreed. Selka was exiled after restitution, escorted beyond borders. The incident rattled confidence. Some villagers demanded closure. Bans, walls, silence. Alira argued for discernment without paranoia. That night she sat by the stream, scrubbing fear from her hands, wondering how many tests Powerth peace demanded before it was believed. Zaven joined her, confessing a desire to strike first, to end threats decisively. Alira admitted the temptation too. They promised to keep choosing restraint together, even when restraint felt like standing bare in wind, trusting skin to toughen rather than tear under pressure, and the long memory of lessons learned the hard way. As heat deepened, a drought crept in. Crops withered, trade slowed, stress gnawed patience thin. Alira coordinated water sharing, rotating fields, teaching songs that coaxed moisture from morning air. The effect helped but could not conjure rain. A council faction blamed reliance on song over strength, pushing to seize wells by force. Zaven refused. Tensions peaked when a neighboring pack diverted a stream. Alira proposed negotiation. Zaven insisted on readiness. They traveled together, presenting terms fair but firm. The neighboring leader scoffed until Alira sang, the melody easing tempers, revealing shared hardship. An accord formed. Water shared by schedule. Returning home, Alira felt pride tempered by exhaustion. That night, she dreamed of cracked earth and children's hands. She woke resolved to institutionalize care. Granaries protected by law. Water councils with rotating seats. Implementation was grueling. Resistance flared. Yet slowly systems held. The bond between Alira and Zaven steadied, learning to flex under strain rather than snap. They disagreed more openly now, trusting the work of repair afterward. Love matured into partnership, sharp-edged but durable. When the first rain finally fell, light and brief, the village cheered. Alira laughed and cried, knowing luck had played its part, but preparation had invited it too. Mid-season, a courier brought word. Iroquois Valesh had resurfaced beyond the mountains, gathering malcontents under a banner promising order through fear. The name reopened scars. Some villagers panicked. Others hardened. Zaven convened the council. Strategies formed. Alliances, signals, evacuation plans for children. Alira focused on morale, telling the truth without feeding terror. She spoke of choice, of how fear had once ruled them and failed. The speech steadied many. Still, threats loomed. Scouts clashed at the borders, brief and bloody. Zaven returned wounded one night, a shallow cut across ribs. Alira tended him, hands shaking. She feared losing him more than losing power. He admitted fear of failing their people. She reminded him leadership was not invincibility. They planned a summit with allied pacts to isolate Iroquois' influence. The summit demanded compromise and humility. Alira sang, then listen. Agreements formed, contingent and fragile. When Iroquois' envoys arrived demanding fealty, they were turned away by united voices. Retaliation came swift, raids at the edges, intimidation. Grim Willow Reach endured, evacuating children as planned, responding without excess. Each day tested resolve. Each night, Alira and Zaven measured the cost and chose again, knowing this chapter would not end cleanly, but could still bend toward justice without surrendering their hard-won soul. The drought broke at last with a storm that raged and cleansed. Rivers swelled. Fields drank deeply. Iroquois' coalition fractured under shared pressure and unified resistance. Scouts reported defections. The summit's alliances held. When Iroquois attempted a final show of force, he found no welcome. Exiled once more, diminished, he vanished into rumor. Summer waned. Grim Willow Reach took stock, losses mourned, gains protected. Alira codified lessons into law, embedding transparency and shared authority. Zaven formalized guardianship training beyond their borders, exporting restraint as practice. On a cool evening, they walked the stream path where fear had once pooled. Fireflies sparked. Alira felt gratitude grounded in work done. She knew peace would never be effortless. It would always ask vigilance, humility, and courage. But it was possible. She leaned into Zaven, feeling the bond pulse warm and steady. Together they watched the moon rise pale, not commanding, simply present. The monster story felt distant now, replaced by a narrative of people choosing better, again and again. Chapter by chapter, they wrote it with care, ready for whatever the next season demanded, trusting the foundations laid would hold when tested, because they had been built together, openly, and with love that did not flinch from responsibility anymore. Autumn returned carrying a sharper edge, and with it came reckoning, disguised as ceremony. Grimwillow Reach prepared to host the first conclave of shared law, inviting allied pacts to witness governance without blood rights. Alira knew eyes would search for cracks. Zaven reinforced boundaries and protocols, insisting calm would be their armor. On the eve of the conclave, a storm stalled travel trapping delegates in the valley. Tension rose with every delayed arrival. Alira welcomed each group personally, naming fears before they hardened. Still, rumor stirred that Iroquois shadow lingered, that disruption was planned. The bond pulsed, warning. During opening rites, a sudden shout split the crowd. A child collapsed, seizing foam flecking lips. Panic surged. Alira knelt instantly, singing low, steadying breath and muscle. The child recovered, eyes clearing. Relief broke applause, then suspicion. Someone had dosed the wine with a mild convulsant, meant to provoke chaos. Guards sealed exits. Zaven ordered restraint. Alira demanded transparency, asking witnesses forward. Silence weighed heavy. Then Selka's former apprentice stepped out, shaking, confessing coercion by emissaries promising safety. The conclave watched closely. Alira chose mercy paired with accountability, turning a trap into testimony. The room exhaled. Crisis had been met without blades, but the message was clear. Peace would be tested publicly, not quietly, and failure would echo far beyond the valley if they faltered again. Negotiations stretched long and grueling. Some pacts pressed for exemptions, others for enforcement teeth. Alira navigated words like narrow bridges, offering flexibility without surrendering principles. Zaven backed her with quiet authority, intervening only when threats sharpened. Midway through the second night, scouts reported movement near the granaries. Diversion. As Zaven split resources smoothly, trusting trained guardians to respond. The intrusion was repelled without injury, culprits captured alive. Their confessions revealed Iroquois' final gambit, collapse trust during the conclave, then present himself as solution. The plot unraveled under witness. Delegates murmured approval. Still, fatigue gnawed. Alira's voice rasped from hours of speaking and song. She retreated briefly, hands shaking, doubt creeping in. Zaven found her by lantern light, reminding her she did not carry this alone. She laughed softly, exhausted, then returned steadied. By dawn, agreements were inked. Shared watch protocols, mutual aid during drought, transparent dispute resolution. No one cheered wildly. Instead, there was nodding, hand clasps, the slow recognition that something durable had been forged through patience rather than fear. The conclave closed with a vow spoken by many voices, echoing across stone and leaf, binding without blood. The aftermath revealed quieter fractures. A faction within Grimwillow Reach accused Alira of overreaching, claiming her influence eclipsed council balance. The charge stung, because it carried a kernel of truth. She called a forum and proposed limits on her role, distributing song instruction and decision authority formally. The gesture surprised critics, disarming some, emboldening others. Debate flared but resolved into structure. Zaven supported the reform despite concerns about dilution. Leadership, they agreed, must be survivable beyond individuals. That evening, Nisara confronted Alira privately, voicing fear that giving up prominence invited attack. Alira admitted fear too, but insisted resilience grew from shared ownership. The bond steadied her conviction. Weeks passed. Systems bedded in. Children practiced songs with multiple teachers. Guardians rotated command. When a minor dispute arose over pasture, It resolved through council mediation without Zaven's intervention. The success felt quieter than victory, but deeper. Alira felt pride laced with grief for the simpler certainty of command, accepting complexity as cost. She learned to rest when others carried weight. Zaven learned to trust processes he had helped build. Love shifted again, less urgent, more spacious, capable of holding difference without rupture, as the village learned to breathe together under shared rules. Winter approached early with bitter winds. A trading caravan arrived battered, bearing news of Iroquois' last stand beyond the high passes. He had tried to seize a stronghold and failed, abandoned by allies who chose the Conclave's protections instead. The messenger asked if Grim Willow Reach would shelter defectors. Debate followed. Alira argued conditional refuge, separating people from leaders, accountability paired with mercy. Zaven agreed. Wary but resolute, the refuge tested logistics and nerves. Some defectors brought trauma and bitterness. Alira organized listening circles, pairing song with silence. Progress came unevenly. One night, a brawl erupted. Zaven intervened, firm and fair, imposing consequences without humiliation. The incident cooled tempers. As snow fell, Alira felt the cumulative weight of choice. She wondered if she had lost something essential by turning power diffuse. Then she watched a former enemy teach a child a calming rhythm, hands gentle, eyes soft. The doubt eased. Change was not dramatic every day. It accumulated in moments like this. The bond warmed, contentment replacing adrenaline. They had survived spectacle. Now they were surviving the work that followed it, together, without applause. As the first deep freeze set in, a quiet crisis emerged. Alira's voice faltered, cracking mid-song. Lisa examined her and prescribed rest. Panic flickered. Without the song, what would happen? Alira faced fear of becoming ordinary again, of being dispensable. Zaven sat with her through the silence, reminding her leadership had never been only her voice. Others stepped in, imperfect but earnest. The village adapted. When Alira finally sang again, weeks later, the relief was communal but measured. She realized her worth had not vanished in absence. That knowledge steadied her more than any melody. Winter held, supplies lasted, disputes resolved. The moon rose often, pale and unremarkable, just another light. Under it, Alira and Zaven walked the perimeter, counting lamps, greeting guards by name. Peace no longer felt like a fragile miracle. It felt like maintenance, hard, continuous, shared, and that, she understood, was its strength. Whatever storms came next, they would meet them not as saviors or monsters, but as partners among many, committed to choosing better again, even when no one was watching, even when the work was quiet and the reward was simply another night without fear. Spring returned uneasy, carrying rumors instead of blossoms. Scouts brought word of a migration moving fast from the west, wolves and humans together, fleeing famine and war, desperate and armed. Grim Willow Reach faced a choice that would test every law it had written. Alira convened the council at once. Some argued to close gates, fearing strain on stores and fragile peace. Others urged welcome, citing shared law and mercy. The bond pulsed with tension as Zaven listened, jaw set. Alira spoke last, naming the fear plainly. Compassion could drown them if unprepared, but refusal could rot what they had built. She proposed a measured welcome, temporary shelter beyond the inner ring, shared labor for shared food, strict disarmament within bounds. The vote was close. The measure passed. When the migrants arrived, exhaustion etched every face. Children clutched scraps, elders leaned on sticks. Alira met them at the outer meadow, voice steady, explaining terms without condescension. Some bristled, others wept with relief. The first nights were restless. Whispers of theft surfaced. A guard was struck. Zaven intervened, firm and calm, enforcing rules evenly. Alira organized work crews and listening circles, pairing song with translation to ease misunderstanding. Progress came slowly, measured in small kindnesses and fewer flinches, while tension hovered like a held breath over fields waiting to be planted again. Not all welcomed the newcomers. A splinter group within Grimwillow Reach began meeting in secret, blaming scarcity on mercy. They painted symbols near wells, echoing old fear. Alira felt the chill of repetition. When a storage shed burned, the village erupted. Accusations flew between locals and migrants. Zaven sealed the area, demanding truth before punishment. Evidence pointed inward, oil traced to a familiar supplier. Confronted, the Splinter's leader claimed necessity, insisting hard lines preserved peace. The argument found ears. Alira countered publicly, recounting how such logic had once justified blood rights. She offered an alternative: shared audits of supplies, transparent rationing, representation for migrants in decisions affecting them. Resistance flared. The vote passed narrowly again. That night, a stone shattered. A window near Alira's quarters. Zaven stood guard, anger coiled tight. Alira refused to retreat. "If we hide," she said, "fear wins." The bond steadied them both. By morning, volunteers arrived to repair the damage, locals and migrants working side by side. The Splinter's fire dimmed, not extinguished, but exposed. Peace, Alira learned, was less about eliminating dissent than preventing it from festering unseen. As planting began, a deeper threat surfaced. Illness spread through the migrant camp. Fever and coughing that song eased but did not cure. Lisa suspected contaminated grain from their journey. Supplies dwindled. Alira faced an impossible calculus: divert medicine and food from Grimwillow Reach or risk deaths beyond the inner ring. The council fractured. Zaven argued survival first. Alira argued humanity. The bond strained, not breaking, but aching. In the end, they compromised. Ration reductions paired with emergency trade and foraging beyond safe zones. Alira led the effort, singing to steady, exhausted crews as they hauled roots and herbs from high slopes. Zaven escorted traders through risky passes. Losses came anyway. A child died. Grief spread like frost. Alira sang at the burial, voice breaking, shame and sorrow braided tight. She questioned every choice. Zaven held her through the night, confessing his own doubts. They did not resolve the pain. They bore it. Slowly the illness ebbed. Survivors recovered. The cost remained visible in hollow eyes and thinner stores. Yet when a migrant elder thanked Alira, saying their children lived because of her refusal to turn away, something steadied. The bond warmed, not triumphant, but grounded in endurance. Summer pressed hard. Fields struggled. Arguments flared over labor distribution. Alira enforced fairness, even when unpopular, rotating crews to prevent burnout. The Splinter tried again, spreading rumors that migrants plotted takeover. Zaven uncovered false messages planted to incite fear. Public exposure blunted the tactic. The Splinter's support waned. One evening, a migrant youth intervened to stop a fight, invoking shared law. The moment rippled through the village, quiet and profound. Alira felt tears sting. Change was teaching itself. At the same time, scouts warned of a distant power consolidating under a charismatic warlord, offering security to starving packs. The threat loomed, but did not yet strike. Alira and Zaven strengthened alliances through the Conclave's network, sharing resources and warnings. The system worked, slowly. Nights grew calmer. Laughter returned in pockets. Alira's voice recovered strength, tempered by rest. She taught new leaders to lead songs without her. Watching others take the center, hurt and healed in equal measure. She was learning the art of stepping back without disappearing, trusting the structure she helped build to hold when she was not the loudest voice in the room. As harvest approached Grimwillow, Reach faced a final test of the season. A flash flood tore through the outer meadow, threatening the migrant camp. Sirens rang. Without waiting for orders, locals and migrants rushed together, forming chains, pulling children and elders to higher ground. Zaven directed from the ridge. Alira sang against the roar, the rhythm guiding movement through chaos. The flood receded, leaving mud and relief. No lives lost. In the aftermath, gratitude flowed freely. The splinter dissolved quietly, members folding back into the whole. At a communal meal weeks later, a migrant elder proposed planting a shared grove to mark survival. The idea took root. Under a mild moon, saplings were set, hands muddy and hopeful. Alira stood with Zaven, watching the circle widen. She felt exhaustion and pride settle together. Peace had not been clean. It had demanded sacrifice, humility, and constant repair. Yet it had expanded rather than shrunk. Under the blood moon's memory and the pale moons that followed, the monster story faded further, replaced by a harder, kinder truth. Communities became safe not by choosing who belonged, but by choosing how to care when belonging was tested. Chapter 8. Closed not with triumph, but with soil pressed around roots, promising growth that would need tending long after the songs ended for the night. Winter returned with teeth, and the distant warlord finally moved. Fires flared along the western ridges, signaling forced pledges and seized children. Scouts arrived bloodied, carrying proof the coalition had failed. Grimwillow Reach had days, not weeks. Alira convened the council under cold lamps, naming the threat without ornament. Evacuation plans activated. Allies were summoned. Zaven ordered defenses that protected people first, land second. Fear surged, but preparation steadied hands. At dusk, a lone envoy approached beneath a white banner, offering terms. Surrender Alira and the songs, receive safety. The demand landed like a blade. Murmurs rose. Alira felt the old pull to sacrifice herself to spare others. Zaven refused instantly, voice iron. The bond flared, pain and resolve braided. Alira spoke calmly, rejecting the terms and countering with witness, alliance, and open law. The envoy smiled thinly and left. That night, the moon rose pale and indifferent. Alira stood watch, realizing this was the hour everything had prepared them for, when mercy must be defended with courage, and love must risk itself without becoming reckless. Snow whispered across roofs as bells were checked. Children counted, maps spread, breaths measured, and resolve hardened before dawn tested promise they had made. Morning broke with horns and smoke. The warlord's vanguard struck the outer fields, fast and brutal, driving families toward prepared routes. Guardians executed drills cleanly, buying time without chasing kills. Alira moved with med teams, singing to steady panic, directing flow with raised hands. Zaven held the ridge, repelling probes, refusing pursuit that would thin lines. Allies arrived by noon, banners snapping, sharing signals learned through the conclave. The battle stayed fragmented, 1,000 sharp moments rather than one decisive clash. When a breach opened near the granaries, migrants and locals formed a human chain, passing water and children through mud. Alira felt pride surge, then terror as a second force flanked them. She ran, voice breaking through smoke, drawing fighters to the gap. Zaven shifted to intercept, injured but relentless. The bond screamed balance. Together they sealed the breach, pushing attackers back without crossing into slaughter. By dusk, the vanguard withdrew, leaving the valley scarred but standing. The cost was real. Wounded counted, names whispered. Alira knelt beside a fallen guardian, promising the work mattered. The moon rose redder than memory, demanding an answer yet to come. Thunder rolled distantly, as if mountains judged restraint, waiting for the night. Night brought the warlord himself, cloaked in authority and fear. He advanced under truce, demanding parley at the stream. Against advice, Alira agreed, insisting witnesses and law. Zaven stood beside her, wounded ribs bound tight. The warlord praised order, then named mercy weakness, offering peace for submission. Alira replied with evidence, alliances, shared stores, records of saved children. She invited inspection. Laughter followed. The warlord struck suddenly, aiming to provoke blood. Zaven absorbed the blow and did not kill. Gasps rippled. Alira sang, steady and clear. Binding tempers across the circle, the law held. When the warlord ordered slaughter, his own lieutenants hesitated, then refused. The conclave's promises echoed louder than fear. Betrayed by restraint, he mocked. The warlord fled amid shouts. Zaven collapsed as the bond burned. Alira caught him, hands slick, refusing despair. Med team surged. The knight exhaled. Victory tasted bitter and clean, earned without becoming what they opposed. Snow began falling, hissing on embers. Bells rang restraint's triumph. Alira stayed breathing with him, counting heartbeats, trusting dawn. Around them, witnesses murmured vows, recording the moment faithfully for history. No blades lifted, no songs commanded. Choice stood visible as law replaced fear before exhausted eyes everywhere present. Dawn revealed the cost and the turning. The warlord's forces scattered, allies secured routes. Zaven survived, stitched and sleeping, breath steady. Alira addressed the valley, voice hoarse, thanking courage and naming grief. Funerals followed, simple and shared. Reparations began at once, fields replanted, stores redistributed. The conclave convened again, confirming sanctions and aid. News spread fast, dulling appetite for tyrants elsewhere. Yet backlash simmered. Anonymous threats appeared, accusing Alira of sorcery and theft of will. She answered with openness, inviting scrutiny, teaching, process, stepping back where possible. The attacks faded without oxygen. Alira sat with Zaven when he woke, fear breaking into relief. He asked if she would have traded herself to stop the war. She answered honestly, once, yes, now, no. He smiled, proud and pained. The bond settled, scarred and stronger. Outside, children played among repairs, learning new songs from many voices. The moon that night was ordinary, and ordinary felt like grace. Council minutes were posted publicly. Patrols stood down, trade resumed cautiously. Trust rebuilt plank by plank. Zaven healed slowly. Alira rested briefly, then returned to work. Together they accepted applause lightly, focusing instead on continuity because peace lived in habits, not spectacles alone ever after. Before sleep claimed the valley, Alira walked the grove planted seasons ago. Saplings stood taller, leaves whispering endurance. She thought of chains, flames, children saved, enemies turned away by law. Zaven joined her, moving, carefully, hand warm in hers. They spoke of Chapter 10 tomorrow, rebuilding beyond survival, choosing joy without vigilance, dulling. Alira admitted fear of complacency. Zaven admitted fear of loss. They agreed fear could inform without ruling. In the distance, horns signaled allies departing safely. The night smelled of wet earth. Alira felt something close to peace, not fragile, but earned. The blood moon's memory faded into pale light, a lesson rather than a threat. Whatever came next, they would meet it together, with witnesses, with law, with songs shared freely. The story was no longer about a monster or a mate alone. It was about a community that refused easy cruelty. As stars steadied overhead, Alira breathed out, ready for dawn and the work that would complete this turning. She smiled faintly, trusting people. Tomorrow promised justice's final stitches. Sleep came at last, guarded by lamps, laws, and quiet songs. Across the valley, lives resumed, resilient and awake, ready to finish what courage had begun together now. Spring arrived clean, washing soot from stone and doubt from faces. Grim Willow Reach rebuilt without hurry, guided by lists, laws, and listening circles. Alira moved through mornings quietly, no longer bracing for crisis, learning the strange skill of tending joy. She delegated, trusted, rested, then returned refreshed. Zaven healed steadily, scars knitting into reminders rather than warnings. Together, they reviewed charters, embedding sunset clauses and audits so power never pooled again. Migrant representatives took seats, guardians rotated command, children practiced songs and consent drills, laughing when they forgot words. Trade resumed fairly, When disputes arose, mediation came first, consequences second, mercy always paired with repair. The grove planted after the flood leafed out, marking seasons better than banners. Alira spoke less, listened more, and felt influence deepen rather than fade. She noticed how often others solved problems before she arrived. Pride flickered, then settled into gratitude. The bond between her and Zaven pulsed steady, not urgent, carrying shared purpose without consuming either. Peace, she learned, was not silence after thunder. It was the sound of work continuing without spectacle, choices made together, habits holding when attention wandered, and courage practiced in daylight, forging tomorrow with care and patience, learned slowly. Yet a resolution required a final choosing, one that closed old wounds cleanly. The council proposed a binding referendum to ratify shared law permanently across allied pacts. Doubt surfaced. Some feared future leaders might exploit openness. Alira advocated safeguards, not vetoes, insisting trust must be earned repeatedly. Zaven supported the measure, offering his own authority to limitation first. The vote was public, names recorded, debates moderated. When the tally finished, approval carried by a clear margin, applause restrained but sincere. Messengers departed at once carrying charters stamped with witness marks. Weeks later, replies returned in kind. Networks strengthened. Iroquois' name faded into footnotes. The warlords' territories dissolved into councils seeking entry. Alira refused triumphalism, emphasizing accountability. She established an ombud circle independent of her role. When challenged, she welcomed review. The act disarmed critics and modeled continuity. At a small ceremony by the stream, Zaven asked again, for vows renewed under law rather than legend. Alira agreed, smiling through tears. They pledged restraint, transparency, and mutual correction, witnessed by children who would inherit the habits they practice today. Together, they sealed futures patiently, choosing ordinary goodness over spectacle, and promising to return power whenever it threatened to harden, again and always. Challenges did not vanish. Alira faced criticism online and in taverns beyond the valley, caricatured as singer, queen, or witch. She answered once, then stopped, letting results speak. Zaven fielded training requests, sending teams rather than branding authority. When a border dispute flared months later, mediation resolved it without her presence. That absence mattered. She spent time teaching successors, then stepped aside during councils, observing process work. On a cold evening, a young guardian corrected an elder respectfully, citing law. The elder listened. Alira exhaled. The bond warmed with pride. She realized success looked like irrelevance. Love, too, matured. She and Zaven argued rarely now, but when they did, repair came quickly, practiced. They planned a family not as heirs to rule, but as citizens protected by rules. Under a pale moon, they released lanterns for the dead, naming losses honestly. Grief integrated, life continued. The village no longer centered on her voice. It harmonized around many. Children led games, elders laughed, markets hummed, and trust showed in. Shortcuts taken openly, debts recorded fairly, and disagreements ending without knives or shame. This normalcy was the miracle they protected daily together, through patience, law, and love, continually renewed by everyone present there. On the anniversary of the blood moon, Alira addressed the valley briefly. She thanked the brave and the careful, named mistakes made and corrected, and invited vigilance without fear. Zaven stood beside her, not towering, simply present. They unveiled a memorial stone etched with names and principles, placed where children played. The message was clear. Memory guided choices. As dusk fell, music rose from many throats, different songs sharing a rhythm. Alira did not lead. She listened, smiling. When the moon lifted, pale and ordinary, no one bowed. Life continued. Later, alone, she and Zaven returned to the stream. He asked if she missed the fire of crisis. She answered honestly, sometimes, but not the cost. They spoke of aging, of stepping back, Further, of teaching others to teach. The bond pulsed content. They had not conquered fear. They had learned to walk with it, hand in hand, without letting it choose. That skill proved durable, shaping mornings, meetings, and quiet nights with equal care. It anchored laws, softened tempers, protected children, and left room for joy to grow. Across seasons, witnesses carried the lesson outward, steadily, until peace felt normal everywhere nearby, and fear finally lost its crown forever. Under a clear sky, Alira lay listening to wind through leaves, thinking of the girl bound in iron and the woman standing free. Zaven slept nearby, breathing easy. She understood endings were not walls, but thresholds. This one opened into stewardship, shared widely, love grounded and courage practiced without spectacle. When dawn came, she rose, ready to work, to laugh, to teach, to rest. The monster had never been the mate. Fear had been. By choosing law, mercy, and community, they had broken its curse. Grimwillow Reach endured, not perfect, but alive. The forest remembered, approving quietly. The moon kept watch without command, and the story closed not with howls, but with ordinary sounds. Tools clinking, children arguing, songs warming kitchens. Under the blood moon's memory, the monster became a mate, and the mate became a promise kept by many hands, every day, again. Justice settled into habit, hope into routine, and vigilance into kindness, ensuring the future remained open and shared. For listeners everywhere, this ending invites choosing better, together. May such courage travel, taught gently, renewed daily. Thank you for walking the path. Carry it forward with care and patience, wherever you stand tonight. Peace is chosen, always. If this story moved you, don't just keep it to yourself. Like this video so it reaches someone who needs hope tonight. Subscribe for more powerful stories where courage is tested and love chooses better. Share this with a friend who believes strength can be gentle and justice can be kind. And tell me in the comments what moment stayed with you the longest. Your voice matters here.